You're listening to the Employee Safety Podcast from Alert Media, a podcast for professionals responsible for the safety and well-being of their employees. Each episode features an interview with a leader in employee safety to discuss how to protect your employees from a wide array of threats, from severe weather to a global pandemic. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the Employee Safety Podcast. I'm Peter Steinfeld. I invited Jason Moreland to guest host today's episode to give you a special report on this year's hurricane season. Jason is the senior meteorologist of Alert Media, and he'll be hosting several episodes this year as part of our 2022 weather series. With hurricane season quickly approaching, I asked him to break down this year's official forecast so you know what to expect and how to prepare. His expert advice can help you save time, minimize impact, and protect your people, no matter where they work. I'll be back next week with a special guest from the American Red Cross, but today it's my pleasure to turn it over to Jason Moreland.
So let's go ahead and get started. So one of the more critical dates during the early part of the year is the initial release from Colorado State University. The official preliminary forecast that was produced on April 7th was calling for 19 named storms, 9 of which are likely to become hurricanes. And 4 of those storms are likely to strengthen even further into major hurricanes. For comparison purposes, the 30-year average is for 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes. We're looking at a 2022 hurricane season that is projected to be about 30 to 35% more active than the average season. So based on prior seasons of similar above-average activity, Colorado State researchers are estimating at least a 71% probability of at least one major Category 3 or higher hurricane making landfall along the U.S. coastline. There's nearly 50-50 odds of a major hurricane making landfall somewhere between the Texas coast and the Florida Panhandle. And likewise, it's a bit of a coin flip as to whether or not a major hurricane will strike along the U.S. East Coast. And we're basically talking about that stretch of coastline from Maine southward through the entire Florida Peninsula. Farther south across the Caribbean Sea, we're also looking at an above average chance of major hurricane activity. Based on estimates, there's about a 60% probability of at least one major hurricane tracking somewhere within the region. And all of these landfall probabilities that we're going through, they're all significantly higher than the long-term averages that have been observed over the last century. So one may ask, what is up with all of this hurricane activity? It seems like every single year we're forecasting above average numbers. And haven't we just gone through a bunch of big hurricane seasons? Aren't we due for some sort of break? And I would argue, yes, I would definitely agree with you there, especially if you're a resident along the Gulf Coast. It seems like one week after another during the summer months, there's been at least one tropical storm or hurricane threat, if not a direct landfall. 2021 was the third most active season on record. That season alone had 21 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 4 major hurricanes. The season before that, 2020, had 30 named storms. And if we look at the all-time records, 2020 now has the most named storms out of any prior season on record. So if forecasts verify, 2022 is going to be well on its way to becoming, in fact, the 7th consecutive season in which we see above average tropical activity. So this is a very active period that we're in, especially when looking at just the last 6 or 7 years. So in looking at the factors, it's really no wonder, at least if you're a meteorologist, why the expectations of another really active season are so high. If we look at the average to slightly above average water temperatures that are still in place across the Gulf, Caribbean, and Atlantic, that's another telltale sign that we're going to be looking at a very active summer hurricane season. So one of the main goals behind these early season forecasts is to not only give people a general idea as to what sort of activity we can anticipate, but it's also a means of increasing awareness that another significant hurricane season is upon us. This is the time to review or formulate your hurricane preparedness plans. Definitely not when a hurricane is already brewing over the Bahamas or Caribbean. By then, it's far too late. So if you have a blank slate and you really don't have a well-formulated plan put together, it may be wise to begin by reviewing all county mitigation plans for areas in which your business has critical infrastructure or personnel. These documents can shed light on potential threats that are unique to the area. So, for example, if one part of the coast is more susceptible to storm surge and flooding, this may be accounted for within these county mitigation plans. Second, if you have any drawn up plans or contingencies, it would be best to communicate those to your employees well ahead of time. And then finally, it is also highly suggested that you go ahead and create some mock exercises. And these can be conducted to seek out any weaknesses within the preparedness plan that your employees can help point out. Employees should also be highly encouraged to devise their own hurricane plans for themselves and their family. It's great if you have a great business plan, but if your employees become unavailable, then that's really going to create havoc not only for themselves, but also business operations. Over the last 2 years, significant population growth has also been recorded across America's Sun Belt. So when we think about many hurricane-prone states like Texas, Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, we've seen exceptional population growth. And for many new residents within these areas, this year is going to be a learning curve when it comes to dealing with tropical threats. And of course, there's also the expanding issue of remote workers, where we need to keep up with threats not only where the primary business location is, but potentially several states away. With that comes the challenge of determining where exactly the hurricane threat is highest. If the cone is to the west of Alabama, for example, that doesn't necessarily mean that the risk of severe weather hazards is zero. As we've seen in the past, we can have significant weather impacts from these tropical systems far beyond the track, far beyond the cone. So it's best to become as educated as possible about tropical weather and tropical weather forecast products so that we can make the best decisions when these systems do rear their ugly heads out across the Atlantic, Gulf, and Caribbean. It is also important to note that these tropical storms and hurricanes are not just coastal issues. In 2020, all the attention was on western Louisiana when powerful major Hurricane Laura was making landfall. But what may have gone unnoticed was that storm continued well inland. And in fact, the National Weather Service had to issue tropical storm warnings well into Arkansas, which for many is completely unheard of. And that's just the wind-related aspect. When it comes to heavy rainfall and flooding impacts, those can extend well into the Midwest United States. And this is days after the storm reaches the coast along the southeast. Major flood events have less to do with a storm's total intensity, but rather the slow movement of these systems after they move inland. Another thing to keep in mind is that we need to be watchful of these tropical depressions and tropical storms, not just the hurricanes and major hurricanes. All employees should know whether they live in a hurricane evacuation zone and have multiple means of receiving critical notifications from local authorities and the National Weather Service. For businesses, building maintenance well before any storms develop on the horizon is critical. Most importantly, one should at least inspect their roof and gutters for any damage or clogged debris. And if there is any confirmed reports of damage or things just don't look right, please go ahead and get a licensed contractor to resolve any potential outstanding issues. And that's going to make your building much more resilient when these major hurricanes or major tropical threats do make landfall. And right before a storm, please do not tape your windows. Taping your windows to guard against flying debris is an outdated recommendation. In fact, when those windows are taped, large shards of flying glass are more likely instead of the window shattering as originally designed. So that's a greater hazard and more harm than it is good. Boarding up or investing in impact-resistant glass are much better options. Invest in backup power blocks and generators for phones and other essential items. And please read the operations manual and test the equipment to ensure that the generator can be used safely to eliminate the chance of accidental carbon monoxide poisoning. Now, in terms of good external resources that are readily available, I would always encourage people to visit hurricanes.gov. Hurricanes.gov is the official website of the National Hurricane Center, and it's the nationally recognized resource for 5-day tropical outlooks and also active storm advisories. And as a gentle reminder, hurricane season officially runs from June 1st through November 30th, but daily tropical outlooks are going to be initiated beginning on May 15th. And it's kind of interesting to note that of the last 7 years, we've had at least one early season development before the month of June. So we here at Alert Media are going to be on the lookout for any early season tropical development that could cause a threat before that official rollout of the season comes around. And that wraps it up for me, but I want to thank everyone for tuning in and listening to the Employee Safety Podcast. It was a pleasure taking over for Peter today, and I hope you all gained some valuable insights that can help you prepare your organization and employees. I'll be back again soon with an overview of the 2022 wildfire season, so please be on the lookout for that episode in a few weeks. Have a safe week, everyone.
Alert Media is changing the way your leaders and response teams connect and communicate effectively when seconds matter. We provide our customers with a comprehensive solution for monitoring threats around the world and deploying fast, effective emergency communication. You need a panic-proof solution for high-stakes moments. In just a few clicks, your team can send a multi-channel notification to an impacted group of people and confirm their safety immediately. When employee safety is at stake, don't just communicate. Connect and confirm with a robust emergency communications solution. Visit alertmedia.com for more information. You've been listening to the Employee Safety Podcast. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. If you're listening in Apple Podcasts, we'd love for you to give a quick rating of the show. Just tap the number of stars you think the podcast deserves. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.